Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus and welcome back to another video. Legacy Evolution is finally complete and it's time to rank the final wave of Evolution, not United. That still has 4 waves of its own. But overall, I'd say this was a pretty strong ending to year 2 of Legacy. Like, I wouldn't say it's as good as waves 5 and 6. It's still a lot better than what we got in wave 4. That really was just the number 1 spot's victory lap in that case. Yep. But thankfully, it seems like they learned from that wave and improved upon it in each of the other waves, despite the fact that each wave got worse as the line went on. What I'm trying to say here is that we had 3 great waves and then a mediocre one. Now, even though this is my video for the last wave of Legacy Evolution, this doesn't mean that you guys will immediately be getting the end of year video ranking all the figures from all the waves. Without extending this intro for too much longer, let's just say that you have HasLab Deathsaurus to thank for this. Alright, now let's get into the actual list. At number 9, this one hurts, Deluxe Class Strongarm. I'll be honest, I know in the past I was pretty down on this thing for being a retool of Alita. But when people actually started getting it in hand, and no, I don't just mean the stolen toys people, I mean a lot of people were saying that this actually improved the Alita 1 mold. And that got me excited. The original mold is my least favorite deluxe class figure from Legacy. At least it was. That changed when I got this in hand, and not only did it not fix the issues, it made them worse. First of all, the feet are still locked up in that weird way, so you can't really pose the ankles freely, not to mention that they're still loose as heck when you do unlock them. But the backpack and the transformation is just so much worse. As opposed to Elita, where my biggest issue was just the elbows not tabbing into the backpack properly, here they do tab in properly. The problem is that the backpack is stiff and you have to scrape stuff past each other, and it's just so frustrating. It's just such a frustrating process. Not to mention, she's still as stiff and awkward as ever due to her posture being way too close together. And now, when you want to pose her, everything bumps into each other. There's now these spikes on the back of the elbows that bump into the backpack. Like I said, not a fun process. And again, like with Alita, I don't dislike this thing. I think it looks good in both modes, and you can still tell who it's trying to be, like what the character is. Like, you can still look at this, and even though it's kind of off, you can still look at it and say, yep, I am holding a deluxe class figure of Strongarm from the 2015 version of Robots in Disguise. Like, it's recognizable as the character. It is just not a fun figure, and that's generally what I look for in stuff like this. I look for figures that I can, pick up and mess around with. And sometimes I can be motivated to transform Alita just for the hell of it. In the case of Strongarm, this is one of those rare cases where I look at it and I think to myself, nah, I don't want to transform that today. And that's a real shame because, like I said, I was starting to become more optimistic. It's just a shame that my initial impressions ended up being vindicated as opposed to my hopes. On a much lighter note, at number 8, we have Leader Class Dreadwing. Now, yes, this is still pretty low on the list, but I cannot stress enough how much of a jump in quality this is from Alita. We went from an unenjoyable but overall okay deluxe to a really good leader that actually fixed some of the issues that the original mold had. Now, that being said, this is only a slight improvement. Because the issue that this fixed when compared to Skyquake is that at the very least, the joints don't feel like they're going to break like they did on that thing. Especially in the shoulders. The shoulders feel at least a little bit reasonable, whereas with Skyquake, I think the ratchets in the left shoulder actually started to decompose over time. That's probably not the right word. They started to deteriorate where they felt less strong over time. Here, I'm feeling pretty confident that they'll maintain their same general strength. On the other hand, the transformation still sucks. It's way too clunky, and there's just too much. Moving the legs around is just a pain, especially moving them around the wings and then getting everything situated, going from jet mode into robot. Just not a fun process. the two modes still look fantastic, and if you're going after a Prime Universe figure specifically just for the look of the two modes, then I cannot recommend this figure more. But if you want a fun experience, then I'd say definitely go with Bulkhead. Or maybe even that eventual Thundertron. That thing looks fun. Yeah, overall, despite its inaccurate wings, as in they should be pointing down instead of up, this is a slight improvement over Skyquake. I guess it does help that it's the more interesting and fleshed out character. So at number 7, we have Deluxe Class Shadow Striker. I'll be honest, when I first transformed this thing, it was a pain in the ass, and if I had stopped there, this thing would have been lower. But I actually transformed it again, and the transformation got easier with each subsequential conversion. So, as a whole, I can say that this is a figure that does everything pretty good. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty good in robot mode, is what I mean to say. It poses pretty good. It transforms really good. Pretty good. And I'd say that the alt mode is the only really good thing. It looks like a neat little take on her vehicle mode that I couldn't find any images of because the only images of her vehicle mode that I could find were toys. And, well, Cyberverse isn't exactly the best toy line ever, so can't really expect accuracy from that. At the same time, though, I think it works pretty decently for a pre-tool of Sideburn from Robots in Disguise 2001. Just need to change the hood up a little bit, and you've got a Dodge Viper. Yeah, overall, it's a really good figure, but it peaks at really good. Everything it does is really good, but none of it is great. It's at least better than Dreadwing, whose transformation still sucks. So number 6 on the list is our first core Class Optimus Prime. You guys have heard me talk about this guy at least twice at this point. Once in the Wave 2 video and once in the Year 1 video. So I'm just going to talk about what they could have done instead of just repacking this guy for the third time in as many years. So, they already gave us Nemesis Prime. That's a good start. They could have given us Optimus Magnus, which is just the white Optimus Prime that usually dons the Ultra Magnus armor. They could have given us Shattered Glass Optimus Prime. They could have given us, let's see, maybe a Toxitron, which I know is generally a Laser Prime repaint, but it still could have worked in these colors. Let me think, what else could they have done? Oh, they could have done a Dead Optimus Prime. That probably would have had less of a reason to exist than this thing getting repacked again, but it would have been interesting at least. And they did repack the... Well, they did do a Dead Earthrise Optimus Prime in Generation Selects. That could have worked. They could have done Toon colors. They could have done literally anything. Like, they could have done anything but repack this figure for the third time. Or I guess just release this figure for the third time, instead of repacking it again for the third year in a row. All that being said, it's still a great little Optimus Prime with really good posing and a better conversion. So I guess I can't be too mad at it. All I'm saying is that repacking the core class Megatron would have made more sense. But speaking of great core class figures, at number 5, core class Snarl, the second best of the core class Dinobots, but only a slight improvement over the third best, which was Slag. And overall, this is a great little figure that has one big issue. But let's go over what it does well first. First of all, it looks fantastic in both modes, very accurate to the design it's based on, and it has a nice little transformation. Of course, getting the front into place is a bit weird because there seems to be a big detent there, big detent in those knee joints. But otherwise, it's a nice little transformation that clicks together very nicely. Like the step combining the first half with the second half, those tabs, is very satisfying here. I'm just going to do it right now. That's nice. It sounds like a Lego brick. Its big issue is the posability. Now, yes, this is probably the second best posing Dinobot of the group, with the best one being Swoop. That was not supposed to rhyme like that. But what I'm saying here is that unlike most of the other Dinobots, this thing actually has elbows and pretty deep ones. And it does have some decent bending at the knees, plus some Ford's butterfly and a waist swivel. I mean, all the Dinobots had waist swivels, but still a nice addition for a core class. The problem is that this thing has no swivels in its arms or legs. Now, here's the thing. At least Swoop had a cut at the thigh that would allow you to swivel the leg on a mushroom peg. What is with me rhyming within sentences? And he had a ball joint in the elbow so you could swivel that and act and basically make it as like a fake bicep swivel. Snarl doesn't have that. He has no swivels in his arms or legs, so posing his arms and legs feels very stiff when compared to Swoop. You can't really get this guy in as many poses as you can with that thing. But it is a fairly minor complaint. If this were on a bigger figure like a deluxe, then yeah, I would have had much more of an issue with it. Or maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know. I focus on transformation when it comes to these things. But for the most part, it's still a very nice little core Dinobot, and definitely an improvement over most of the other ones where they either had really out of whack proportions or no elbows or they're sludge, and that's just a mess on all its own. Yeah, not as good as Swoop by any means, but second best is nothing to be ashamed of. So at number 4, we go from a second best of a group to the best of a group with Deluxe Class Bombshell, a retool of Shrapnel. I almost forgot his name for some reason. And it would probably be hard to tell just by looking at the alt mode alone, since the arms end up in very different spots. But really, that just goes to show how much effort was put into this thing to, at least make it somewhat different from Shrapnel. Like, yeah, from the waist down, it is the exact same, but from the waist up, they actually did a decent amount to make it different. Like having the bug legs work in a certain way, having the arms transform in a certain way, or in a different way, I should say. Even having the head do different stuff, which this is Bombshell, it kind of has to, considering how his head looks. And I will say my biggest issue with this thing is that the transformation is still as basic as ever, but I find that this thing is much less boring than Shrapnel. The purple chest definitely pops, which is an inaccurate detail in robot mode, but not so much in bug mode, which I'm pretty sure they prioritized here, given, the fact that the head covering thing is much bigger than it should be, and again, the chest is purple. But I find that I like this thing a lot more than Shrapnel because there's a lot more going on and it's a lot more fun. This is a much more fun figure. Even though the transformation is still kind of basic, it's at least less basic. The arms do something outside of peg along the sides. They actually hinge down. And honestly, I just love the bug mode on this thing. It's really cute. Kind of reminds me of that weird pig thing from Monsters University. So yeah, overall, definitely the best of the Legacy Insecticons, but not my favorite deluxe of this wave. That honor, surprisingly, goes to Detritus, who went from potentially being at the bottom of this list to being number 3. I'm honestly surprised that that's how things ended up playing out, because I was not excited for this thing at all. I wasn't dreading it unlike Strong Arm, but I wasn't expecting to love it, but I do love it. For context, I'm not really the biggest fan of the Siege Hound mold. It's not bad by any means, it just has issues, especially in regards to the transformation. The way the roll cage, the way you have to scrape the legs past the roll cage is a pain in the ass. Plus, it never really felt like the most stable and well-connected thing when you eventually got into Jeep mode. Plus, the feet on mine really like to pop off, or I guess more the toes like to pop off, which maybe that was just the fact that I have the Netflix version and the plastic on that thing ain't exactly the greatest. But this thing actually fixes my 2 biggest issues with that figure. For one, the roll cage is completely gone, so you don't have to worry about scraping anything past other parts, and the toes don't pop off as much. There's still a little bit of an issue with the transformation, with how everything works up front. It can be a little frustrating to do all that. But at the same time, this just has a much nicer transformation than the original mold did. So honestly, this actually got me a lot more excited for the eventual Hound redeco, though I am left wondering why this came out before Hound when Hound was revealed, or I guess leaked first. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But honestly, looking at this in Hound colors, I think it looks excellent in both modes, and it's just a overall fun figure, and definitely not as basic as Bombshell. So yeah, definitely the big surprise from this wave for me because, like I said, was not expecting to love this thing as much as I do, but I do love it, and I'm really happy about that. So at number 2, our runner-up is Voyager class Trashmaster. Yeah, it took a while to get to the Voyagers here because the class has definitely had some redemption after its lackluster showing in Wave 6, which neither of those figures were bad, but Dirge was limited in a lot of weird places, and the transformation on Nemesis Leo was still not that great. Here we have a cool-looking, well-posing figure that has a really fun transformation, and as a result, it ended up being my favorite of the Legacy Junkions. Now, like with Detritus, I wasn't really anticipating this thing all that much. Then again, that just comes from the fact that this thing didn't exactly click with me at first, but it's certainly clicking with me now that I have it in hand. This is just a really fun Voyager. And not just with the transformation, but even just the feel of it. The plastic feels great, and in garbage truck mode, I don't know why a Junkion would turn into a garbage truck, considering that they're made of junk, but whatever. It's Transformers. Not everything has to make sense. I'm just checking to make sure what I just said makes sense. But yeah, not everything has to make 100% sense. But it also just feels like it has a lot of really nice weight to it. And overall, this is just an excellent figure. But still not my number 1 favorite. That honor goes to the number 1 of the wave, Voyager class Bludgeon. Listen, it's a repaint of Tarn. What were you expecting? You guys know me at this point. I love that Tarn from the first wave. I consider Wave 4 to be Tarn's victory lap because while all the other new molds in that wave were, good at best and kind of mediocre at worst, Tarn was a shining light in a wave of darkness. Been playing way too much Kingdom Hearts recently. So seeing a repaint of him in Bludgeon colors, first of all, yeah, I will admit I did want them to retool a little bit more at first, but honestly, seeing it, the more I look at it and having it actually in hand, I couldn't care less. Honestly, I think the mold wears Bludgeon's colors really well. They actually gave him a handheld accessory, so the hot rod shoulders are actually have added functionality now, since you can actually get this thing into some really awesome sword poses. And just the variety with this guy is really nice, especially with the fusion cannon. Mainly with the fusion cannon. One, you can have it on his back for a more IDW accurate look, or if you want to go for something more comic, or not comic, G1 accurate, even though this thing isn't trying to be G1, you can have it on this. You can have the cannons on the arm. Now, while I would say the posability is a little bit better thanks to the added accessory, the transformation seems to be somewhat harder and therefore kind of worse. It's hard for me to say whether or not I like this more or less than Tarn at first, but then I go to the transformation, and the fact that it's slightly harder on this one does make my decision a little bit easier. Which is to say that I don't like handling things as much as I do Tarn. But overall, this is still a fantastic mold, and I've heard some people say that they actually like the colors on this one more. And honestly, I can't exactly blame them for that because just about everything pops, whether that be the clear orange or the bright red paint used for his eyes and mouth. Like, seriously, nothing on this figure to me pops more than the paint for his eyes and mouth. That is some bright red they've been using for these figures. But yeah, maybe it was a predictable number 1, but I'd still say it's a deserving pick. Well, anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my video for Wave 7 of Transformers Legacy. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'm not going to bore you with all the generic stuff. I'll see you guys probably in December for the ranking of every figure of Legacy Evolution. Take care, and Godspeed.